It was one of those evenings where everything felt just slightly off. My husband was away on a business trip, and the house felt a little too quiet. A storm was gathering outside, and I had just finished cleaning up the dinner dishes when I heard my son call for me from upstairs. I answered distractedly, assuming he needed help with his homework, but his voice was different, a little too calm, a little too firm. "Mom, come here, please," he said again. I climbed the stairs, unsure what I would find, and slightly annoyed at the tone. Then I reached his room and froze. My heart started pounding, not because something was wrong, but because something was very, very right. And it was coming from him, not me. He was standing there in the middle of his room holding a shoebox in both hands. His face was serious, too serious for a 12-year-old boy. I was about to ask what was going on when he opened the box. Inside were a few crumpled bills, a pocket knife, and a small photograph of our family from years ago. He looked up at me and said, "I think it's time I told you what I saw last week." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, heavy, and choking. I sat down slowly, afraid to speak, afraid of what might come next. He closed the lid and sat beside me, and then my son began telling a story that made my hands tremble. He told me how he had come home early from school a week ago and had heard noises in the garage. He thought it was his dad, but when he looked through the window, he saw a man he didn't recognize rummaging through the shelves. My son watched in silence from the shadows, not moving, not breathing. He saw the man take something, a small envelope, and slip it into his coat before walking away casually as if he belonged there. He wanted to call me, he said, but he was scared. He thought maybe it was one of his dad's coworkers or friend. But something about the way the man moved didn't feel right, and he couldn't forget it. The next day, he searched the garage trying to figure out what had been taken. He found an empty spot behind the toolbox where a metal box used to be. One he remembered because his dad always told him not to touch it. He knew it was important. That's when he decided to start watching the house. Every day after school, he kept an eye on the yard, the street, the doorways, just in case the man came back. He didn't tell me because he didn't want to scare me, and tonight he had found that old shoebox in his closet, filled it with anything he thought might help us understand what had happened. He wanted to protect us. By now, my throat was dry and my fingers numb. I looked at my son and realized I had underestimated him, his mind, his instincts, his courage. He had acted with more clarity than most adults would in a situation like this, and now he was looking to me not for comfort, but for a decision. "What should we do?" he asked, not with fear, but readiness. I told him first that I was proud of him, that he had done nothing wrong, and that I believed him completely. Then I picked up my phone and called my husband. My voice was shaking as I told him what our son had witnessed. He was silent then. He said something that changed everything. He told me he knew who it was. He said the man worked for him once, but had been fired for stealing. A few months back, he had broken into another employee's home looking for files. Luckily, he hadn't hurt anyone, but had disappeared before the police arrived. My husband never imagined he would come near our home. My son handed me the photo he had saved in the box. It was faded but sharp enough to show the man's face in the background from a family barbecue. Years ago, I felt chills run down my spine. The memory of that day suddenly soured by the realization of what we had missed. We took the photo to the police that night, along with everything our son had remembered, described, and collected. They were impressed not only by the detail, but by his intuition. Within days, they tracked the man down. He had been squatting in an abandoned building just a few blocks away. Inside, they found stolen documents, electronics, and dozens of other personal items from different homes. But it was our envelope they found sealed and untouched that helped tie him to our case, and it was my son's testimony that helped seal the charges. The officers told me later, "Your kid doesn't just have a good memory, he has a mind like a hawk afterward." Life slowly returned to normal, but I was never quite the same. Every time I looked at my son, I didn't just see my little boy anymore. I saw the protector, the thinker, the witness. I used to worry about him being too quiet, too observant now. I understood those were his strengths, his teachers noticed. It too, he became more confident, more vocal in class, like something inside him had been validated. The day we received the court letter confirming the sentencing, he didn't say much. He just looked at me and asked if I felt safe again. I hugged him and said with a lump in my throat, I do because of you. People often say children are too young to understand, but that night taught me. They see more than we give them credit for. They absorb the world silently, bravely, and sometimes act with more maturity than grown men. I learned to listen not just to what my son said, but what he didn't say. To watch his eyes when he seemed deep in thought, to pay attention to the questions he asked quietly when no one else was around. He was still a child, but one with eyes wide open, and he had reminded me that bravery doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with silence followed by action. So when people ask me why I share this story, I tell them it's not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. It showed me that heroes don't always wear badges or capes or uniforms. Sometimes they wear pajamas and carry shoeboxes full of truth. My husband may not have been home that night, but my son was, and he was exactly what we needed. He trusted his instincts, protected his family, and spoke when it mattered most. And in doing so, he taught me more about courage than I had ever known. It was his moment, not mine, and I will never forget what he did when it counted most.